go. Whoops. Oh, I don't want to do that. Good evening, everybody. Thank you all for sitting so patiently and for coming up 2 hours now. And so, can I suggest that perhaps everybody get up and have a bit of a wee stretch? Wiggle your pelvic floor around. That's good. Yes, have a sit down again. Thank you everyone for coming tonight. And I want to thank Jen and Emma very much for inviting me to talk tonight. I want to talk to you tonight about epigenetics. Why do I think you should know about this? Well, because this cutting-edge area of research is discovering that you have more influence over your genetic code than we ever thought possible. And not only that, but you can influence the genetics of the next generation that follow you as well. I want to talk about the best way to wear your genes. And also, because I think it's fascinating the brilliance of how all this works, and so I hope you might catch a bit of that too. Right, first we need to do a little bit of biology. But don't worry, I'm going to try and keep it interesting. So your genes are the instructions for your whole body, and you have a copy of them inside every cell of your body, with a few exceptions. That instruction book is written on long molecules called DNA, and you can see it here up the top there. I don't know whether you can see this red pointer or not. And so if you took the DNA from one cell and you stretched it end to end, it would reach over 2 meters long. And if you took the DNA from every cell in your body and put that end to end, it would stretch right across the solar system, twice. And so that's like, you could use it to wrap the world up like a ball of wool, round and round and round. So somehow this 2 meter string has got to fit into a space tinier than you can even see. And so not only that, it's got to never get tangled, it's got to be able to be read at any time, and it has to be able to make a complete copy of itself, and it's got to do this all really fast. It's just incredible. Our best computers haven't got a patch on that type of data storage and retrieval. So to get it into that small space, you have to wrap it around proteins. And so those are called histones. You can see that is a histone right there. And so these histones, they act like knobs. And so to tighten or loosen the instructions. So that will allow them to be read more or less easily. Tighter, meaning less easily, looser, more easily. So you also have switches, and you can see one here. It attaches onto the DNA and says, "Don't read here," and this is called methylation. So the instructions are your genes, and that is called the genome, and the knobs and the switches are called the epigenome, and that literally means above your genome. And the study of this is called epigenetics. So, how are we doing so far? Hopefully. Hang in there. I think you're going to think it's worth it. We just had to get that little bit out of the way first. So, it's actually more helpful if you think about your genes as the hardware of a computer, and your epigenome is the software that runs it. So hardware in your computer typically doesn't change, but the software changes every time you sort of do an update or something like that. And so, but it's also not exactly like a computer, and so let me give you another example. It's also helpful to think of your genes, or the hardware, as we were saying before, as the letters in a paragraph. and the epigenome, or the software, like we were saying before, as the punctuation of that paragraph. So I'll give you an example. So this is our paragraph. Dear John, I want a man who knows what love is all about. You are generous, kind, thoughtful. People who are not like you admit to being useless and inferior. You have ruined me for other men. I yearn for you. I have no feelings whatsoever when we're apart. I can be forever happy. Will you let me be yours, Gloria? Okay, so now, same paragraph, different punctuation. Dear John, I want a man who knows what love is. All about you are generous, kind, thoughtful people who are not like you. Admit to being useless and inferior. You have ruined me. For other men I yearn. For you I have no feelings whatsoever. When we're apart, I can be forever happy. Will you let me be yours, Gloria? So I'll give you another example. Stop clubbing, baby seals. So once again, you can see punctuation makes all the difference. So the epigenome doesn't change the genes, just how they're read. So we all know that you can't pass some things on to your kids. So like scars, for example, that you've acquired, or memories that you've made. Because acquiring them doesn't alter the genes or the DNA. And I was taught that the only things that you passed on to the next generation was your genes. But recently, an interesting experiment was done where rats smelled a chemical called acetophenone, which is a nice orangey, cherry, almondy kind of smelling chemical. And they paired that with a painful electric shock. And so pretty quickly, the rats learned to fear the smell, and so no surprises there. But what was interesting was that they then developed new nerve cells in their nose and in the smell processing center of their brain. And what's even more interesting is that the rats' pups and the pups' pups were found to have the same neurons, and they were startled by the smell of acetophenone, even though they had never met that smell before, or had they ever met their father before. So how is it that something that's learned can be passed on? Well, hopefully you're thinking epigenetic, and you'd be right. But scientists didn't think it was possible to pass along the epigenome, or the punctuation of the sentences. You get two sources of your genes, one from your mum and one from your dad. So this is a sperm cell. This is the smallest cell the human body can produce. If you just try to pack the dad's genes in here, and you've already got totally amazing data storage. Like for all the whiz-bangery on our smartphones, we aren't even close to getting what is achieved in men's bodies. So, yeah. So now it's been discovered that somehow not just the letters or the genes get fitted in there, but the punctuation or the epigenome gets fitted in as well. So a study from the University of Copenhagen has found that the punctuation varies according to whether you're lean or obese. So in this study, they had three groups. They had skinny men, they had fat men, and then they had men that were about to undergo weight loss surgery. And so they analysed the sperm of these three groups before the surgery, and then again 1 year after that group had their surgery. And they found that there were 5,000 changes to the epigenome in these men's sperm. So remember that the epigenome is telling the genes what to do. So this is compared to the unchanged fat and skinny men. The areas that changed were to do with appetite control, and the weight loss surgery had reduced their appetite. So the significance of this is that in men, information about the state of your appetite is passed on in your sperm. Now, this is extraordinary research because it was never thought that this was possible, because scientists thought that the information in your sperm was static and unchanging. So there's another reason why it was thought that you can't pass on something that you've learned. This is what an embryo looks like in a couple of days after fertilization. It's about 8 cells at this stage. It was thought that any software or epigenome from the mum was wiped at this stage because the embryo had to start with a fresh slate. So that's so mothers don't deliver adult babies, which probably wouldn't be very pleasant. Imagine the pelvic floor damage on that. So, well, it turns out that not all the software is wiped. So that means, based on the last slide and this one here, that you get some epigenome from your mum and some from your dad. So that means our grandparents were making dietary decisions that affect us today. So how did I get to that point? Well, there was this very isolated town in 19th century Sweden called Ivakalik. And they used to have years of good food production and also years of bad food production. And because they were so isolated, if they had a bad food production year, that meant famine. And so they did the study that followed up the kids who were born in the famine years, and they compared those to that were born in the feast years. And the women who gave birth to babies in the famine years went on to have super healthy sons and sons as well. And so they had really low rates of heart disease and diabetes, and on average they lived 32 years longer than the grandsons born to women in the feast years. And so don't starve your kids yet, though. It's pretty early days in this whole epigenetics thing, and we don't know how those switches got flipped. So that's my little disclaimer. So if you look at this diagram, you can see how this happened, because you've got the pregnant mum there, and so it's the fetus gets affected by the conditions that was happening in the pregnancy, but also the fetus's reproductive cells as well. So hence that's where that next generation, like the sons come from. So this is epigenetics that's doing this. And so we've got diabetes and autoimmune disorders and cancers. These are all things you've heard of, but they're a lot more common now than they used to be. And it's starting to look like these may be caused by epigenetic information that's passed down from our parents. So is there anyone else who's thinking when they get to this stage, like, is there like no time in my life where I'm allowed to be irresponsible now? I have to be irresponsible before I'm a parent as well as after I'm a parent. So, well, the good news is that you're not limited. So while your epigenome is inheritable, it also means that it's influenceable. And so you're not limited by what you inherited. And while you can't change the hardware that you've got, you can influence the software or the bad punctuation. So what determines these influences on your epigenome? Well, this is pretty new science, and there's a lot we don't know. But we know that the cell membrane, which is the outside of every cell in your body, is what does the changing. And so you can see one here. The signals come from the environment. So this is a signal, this red big dot up here, attaches into here, sets off a cascade of changes inside your cell, including including changes to your epigenome or your software. So they receive these signals from your blood, and these signals come from what? Well, we know from before that, there we go, two, that diet and also weight change can affect these. So we can add to these stress levels, chemical exposure, and social networks, and nurturing, and medication. So you're right to be concerned about the chemicals you're exposed to, and you're right to be concerned about your breathing and stress levels, as we've already heard tonight. You're right to be thinking about what you can and can't do, like as Miriam was talking about, and how your cortisol levels, like what Nikki was talking about. Like it's amazing how even though I didn't really know what everyone else was talking about, how it all relates. And so it's so all of these things are affecting you on a genetic level. And so there's another one, and that is thoughts. So science is finally catching up with the fact that we are what we think. And so when I prescribe an antidepressant to people at work, most of these people get better. When they're suffering from depression, we give them an antidepressant, most of these people get better. So it could be that the medication is working, but studies have shown that it's actually much more likely that it's the fact that they are doing something, it's the something that's working. And so this is a good example of thoughts and behaviour actually changing your body. So I was taught that after childhood your brain can't change, that you're born with a certain number of brain cells and you lost a large number of them in the first few years of your life, and then you were stuck with the remainder, unless you drank away a few more in med school days. It turns out that you have new brain cells that are birthed every day waiting to be put to use. And this, I was also taught that you only use parts of your brain and that in between times it is silent. And so it turns out even when you're at rest, your brain is highly active. And excitingly, every time you learn a new skill, you change your brain. All of our behaviours change our brain, and they're not limited by age. So when you have a thought, you change your brain, but only at a chemical level. And while that's a good start, it's not the kind of structural change that you're really after. You want to change your brain on a structural level. So, and that only comes from struggle and practice. So structural change is significant because the more you think in a certain way, the more automatic and the more effectively you start to think it. So this works for patterns of thinking, and it also works for bad patterns of thinking. So that is, it can be positive, like getting new knowledge, or learning a new skill, or quitting smoking, or it can be negative, like forgetting something you knew, or getting addicted to drugs, or post-traumatic stress disorder. Here's the key thing, that when you think, you change your epigenome of your brain, and then it's your brain that changes the epigenome of your body. So this fits well with studies which show that the best driver of brain change, or neuroplasticity as it's called, is your behaviour. What that means is the more you practice, the better you get, and the dose of practice you need is large. So neuropathic brain change is highly variable from person to person. So different things will come easily to some people and more might be more of a struggle for other people. What we know though is that there's nothing better than practice. Increased struggle leads to better learning and increased brain change on a structural level. Right, so let's summarise what we've covered so far. The software of your epigenome covers the hardware, controls the hardware of your genes. So this hardware can't change, but the software is changeable, and some of this epigenome can be passed on from generation to generation. Your epigenome is controlled by your cell membrane, which is in turn controlled by signals in your blood. Some of these are internal signals, like thoughts, and some of them are external factors like food and chemicals. So some of these factors you have control over, and some of them you can't. The ones that you do have control over are controlled by your brain, and your brain is far more capable of change than we ever thought, and it is changed by your mind, and it's not limited by your age. So the significance of all of this is that the research strongly points to your thoughts being able to control the expression of your genes. And not only that, but it has the potential to influence the next generation. So you might be thinking, yikes, what damage have I done? and what can I do about it? Well, unique amongst animals, we have the ability to observe our own thinking. So what you need to do is to capture your thoughts. Toxic thinking leads to toxic changes, and positive thinking leads to positive changes. So neuroscientific research is proving what we all knew instinctively all along, and what we've heard from the other talks tonight, is that, to quote Dr. Caroline Leaf, what you are thinking every moment of every day becomes a physical reality in your brain and your body. It's your attitude and not your DNA that determines much of your quality of life. So you cannot control the you cannot control the events or circumstances of life, but you can control how you react to those events and circumstances. You can get the chaos that might be in your mind under control. If you wired those toxic thoughts in, you can wire them out. Particularly, you want to capture thoughts like, I can't do this, or it's too hard, it's never worked before, I'm not smart enough, or I'm so unfortunate. And so, because all of those, they'll contribute to structural change, and you'll get more efficient at thinking those things, and that's not what you want. In medicine, we're likely to see some big advances in how we treat disease because of epigenetics. And with things that run in families, like if you believe you're destined to suffer depression because your mother had depression, then you need to get some help to change those thoughts, because and then you can change your destiny. The epigenome that we have may predispose us to smoke or to eat too much, or of the wrong foods, or be negative, but worry too much is another one, but these can change. Because this is so new and the knowledge is in its infancy, what I'm about to say next is my speculation on where I would put my efforts. So even if it's too late to change what epigenome you've passed on to your kids, it's not too late to speak good things over their lives and to encourage positive thinking and positive behaviour in them or your grandchildren, so that their epigenome is the best it can be to be passed on. Mums, positive touch and nurturing. I know every mum strives for that, and the stakes are already high, but know that when you're doing those things, it is making a difference. And everything that you are doing may be written into your DNA. Watch out for bitterness. I'm convinced this has the ability to poison your epigenome. If you're struggling with bitterness, get some help by finding someone who can help you process this. Our bad choices may become our grandchildren's predispositions. But don't forget, that's not the same as their destiny. So if I was to sum this up in a few words, then I would say that you make a choice to change your epigenome, and how you think will best help you wear your genes. Thank you.